Hello and welcome to another tutorial. I'm James Baldwin, World's Fastest Gamer 2019 and professional GT3 driver. So today we're going to look at how to master one of the most legendary racetracks across the globe, both on the sim and in reality. So stay tuned. Silverstone is one of the most iconic racetracks in the world, and I can't wait to race in it myself as part of the British GT Championship.
Therefore, we'll take a look at the track that is known for being the venue that hosts the British Grand Prix every year, and it's the first ever racetrack to host a Formula 1 race. So Copse, Maggots and Becketts, these are some of the legendary corners and spots everybody should know at Silverstone. In this video we'll take a good look at the racetrack and I'll show you how to prepare to race on it.
First of all, which game should you play to get the most immersive feeling of Silverstone?
In fact, there are plenty of options to play Silverstone because almost every big sim or game has a version of Silverstone to drive on. From Assetto Corsa Competizione to F1 2020, even Need for Speed Shift included the racetrack. Not really a surprise because it is definitely one of the most legendary circuits in the world. However, for me it's very easy to decide which game to use to prepare for a real life race at Silverstone, and that's Assetto Corsa Competizione.
So a special feature about ACC I really enjoy is the technology they use to laser scan the tracks. I mean, iRacing, rFactor 2 all have laser scan tracks within their game. I feel like ACC is just on a different level though, and as a driver it allows you to replicate the feeling of driving on that track with a lot of precision.
Since I am a GT3 driver, the decision to use ACC was made even easier because it concentrates on only GT3 and GT4 cars, as you can see in another one of our tutorials. However, even if I drove an open wheeler like a Formula 3 car or something like that, I would still use ACC at some point simply because the tracks are laser scanned and they're really accurate.
If you don't want to get into ACC, that's not a problem. There's plenty of games out there. F1 2020, the original Assetto Corsa, rFactor 2, iRacing, the list goes on. All of them will allow you to get used to a certain car on a certain track, but in my opinion, I think it's better to play ACC because the track is as realistic as it gets.
There are two different ways to approach a new track. In real racing you start slowly and drive with caution around corners at the beginning, but then gradually build up the speed to test the limits. It's important to drive cautiously because crashing during the practice sessions is not an option. It's far too expensive and very time consuming.
However, in sim racing you have a big advantage, and that is it doesn't matter how much you crash in practice.
So in sim racing I go very aggressive on a track when I'm starting to learn it, even too hard so I crash. The next steps are learning from that and going less aggressive, just slow enough that I don't crash anymore. That is the way to test the limits of a track because in a sim there's no risk of crashing, doing any damage or losing any time in practice. With this approach we can take a look at our racetrack for today.
So at Silverstone there are some tough corners you need to look out for.
We'll jump past the first corner Copse and go directly to Maggots and Becketts. Quite a famous sequence of corners. The difficulty here is you drive through it at a high speed because you enter from a long straight. Also the corners themselves are rather open and flowing. This is why it's really important for you to hit the racing line in these corners. Every step too far outside the right zone could mean you go off and crash at high speed. Maintaining a high speed through this sequence of corners is very important, but getting a good exit off Chapel, the final right, onto the hanger straight on the way up to Stowe is just as important because it gives you a perfect chance to build a gap to those behind you, but take on your next opponent ahead of you.
Another tricky section at Silverstone to nail is turns 16-17 on the new circuit, so Vale and Club, which is directly after Stowe.
These are two slow corners where you approach with a very high speed initially. It's very easy to lock your wheels when you brake, so you need to find a good spot to brake early enough. Otherwise you'll end up in the curbs and you'll lose a heap of time.
Another tricky set of corners is turns 3 and 4 if you're looking at the new circuit, the right-hander being called Village and then the left-hander being called the Loop.
It starts with a right-hander followed by a left-hander. They are low-speed corners that look easy at first, but since it's very tight, it's very easy to lose traction. You really need to hustle the car to get round here quickly. It's a very tricky combination.
So these are the three combinations of corners I look at more than others when I look at Silverstone. But Silverstone has a different array of corners and they're all difficult in their own way. But like everything in sim racing, the crucial part is the driving. Test various setups and see if they suit your driving style. Put lots of hours in, that's the only way you're going to learn. And trust me, every time you go out on track, you do tend to learn something a little bit new.
So developing the setup, carrying more corner speed, working on your braking points, there are so many different ways to improve at a track. What also helps me is to create the most immersive feeling possible, so when I get into the real situation it's not so much for shock. And it's not only the track that should be as realistic as possible. While you can obviously use different monitor setups, my personal preference is to use VR to prepare for real races. With the right VR setup, you get a different perspective of corners and the track itself compared with a monitor. That said, it's obviously best to set up the graphics optimally to create a better in-game world, otherwise it's pointless. On top of that, what I also like to do is increase the force feedback in my wheel to try and match it to the McLaren in real life, so when I get in the car in real life it's one less thing to adapt to. So like I said earlier, in the real world there's no margin for error, and on the sim you get that chance to go and push beyond the limit without suffering the consequences. Never be afraid to crash in a simulator. You'll always learn from it. Next lap, come round, do the same corner and do it a little bit better. Games such as ACC give you a very immersive feeling, probably the most immersive you'll get in sim racing, and who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one ending up at Silverstone driving a real race car. Anything's possible. Well, that's it from me for this episode. Next time we'll take a deeper look into getting the perfect wheel on F1 2020. Check out Overtake on YouTube, or if you want to know anything about sim racing, go and check out their website. It's pretty sick, not gonna lie. But I've been James, and I'll see you all on the next one.